Now, physiologically, why is one person a transsexual and someone not? In a future program, I'm going to give you a complete 1-hour discussion of what I believe are the physiological causes of transsexualism, transgenderism, cross-dressing. It's a very interesting class that I've given before at speaking engagements, but I'll give you the nutshell of it right now. In the 12th to 14th week of pregnancy, there is a flush of testosterone over the brain of the developing fetus that is supposed to be male. That's the way it's supposed to work. And this flush of testosterone has an interesting effect. Testosterone is well known in the system to create more serotonin and serotonin family neurotransmitters. They're exciters. And the exciters make the whole neural network of the brain fire easier, work faster, be more powerful compared to the biochemistry. The biochemistry is like a big biological soup, biochemical soup, and that soup is where our emotions come from. Our logic comes from that overall neurology in the brain, and our emotions come from the soup in which it sits. So if you have more testosterone, it boosts the amount of serotonin, the whole neurology starts firing more, that's the ones and zeros, it fires or it doesn't. That gives you your binary, logical, linear sense, and that makes you more logistic, more interested in space. If you don't get that flush of testosterone, then you don't have a flush of something else. The flush of estrogen doesn't come in. According to physiology, you just don't get the flush of testosterone. If you don't, then the amount of estrogen there, estrogen acts as a suppressant of the serotonin. And as a result, the neurology part of the biochemistry is suppressed. It's not that the biochemistry itself is ever raised, it's that it's either the serotonin raises the neural network, okay, the logic side, or it doesn't happen and the amount of estrogen there suppresses that side. Now that doesn't make you stupid. It just means that you have more emotional intelligence and less logistic intelligence, because there are two parts of your mind, the emotion and the reason. And the balance between the two, well, if all there was is one big neural network and there was just one big biochemical soup, then that flush would go up and it would go down after that 2 weeks, and you would end up not having any difference between men and women at all. But in the work that I've done in Dramatica looked at story as if every story was a single human mind, the psychology of a single human mind. And if you want to know why we came to that conclusion, you can go to storymind.com, the Dramatica website, and there's all kinds of explanations and arguments why we think that exists. That in the process of communicating author to audience, it had to be attached to a carrier wave that was representative of the whole mind. Okay? Now if this is the case, we were able to say then things that happen in psychology we'd find in this model of the mind. And we did. Everything we could find in psychology that was verified and proven and experimentally tested for years and years did show up in the model. But also we found things in the model that no one had ever found in psychology. And we said, well, in that case, if the model's accurate, then we've discovered some new things that will be discovered in psychology. And one of the things we discovered was that in order for the mind to have any meaning at all, it has to be determined whether it is a male mental sex mind or a female mental sex mind. And in the Dramatica software, which is the best-selling story creation software in the world that I co-created, we even got a patent on the algorithms that are programmed into it to describe the story mind from the U.S. government. That software needs to know male or female mental sex to the story mind before it can determine the structure of the story. Now, the way it worked from that, over the last 20 years of devising this, I came up with a theory for how that biological wash happens in that 12th to 14th week, what it does. Here's what goes on. Inside our overall brain, there are a bunch of smaller neural networks called ganglia. Ganglia. And cough too. Ganglia. Okay? Ganglia are little tiny neural networks with like 4,000, 8,000, 10,000 on up, little neurons. And they all hang together in a little clump. And they have their own microclimate zone of biology, of biochemicals around them. And they've also got something special in them. They've got things called L cells and R cells. Now, it's my belief, although they don't know yet, or at least a couple of years ago when I last checked, nobody had any real clues as to what the L and R cells did, but it's my belief that one of those kinds of cells creates serotonin, and the other one creates dopamine, or some other kind of inhibitor. and that it's the balance between how much serotonin and how much dopamine is created in those little individual islands of neurological activity in the brain, little microscopic things, that determines whether the underlying thought process below the whole brain as a whole and down at the level of the individual components, whether it favors logic or emotion as a means of thinking, whether it favors intellectual intelligence, reason intelligence, logic intelligence, or emotional intelligence. During that 12th to 14th week, I believe that those cells are doped to maintain a bias, that either the cells that create the serotonin will be enhanced and locked into that position, or the dopamine creating ones will be at a higher position and locked in that position, so that underneath all your experience, underneath all your beliefs, underneath all of your training, there's going to be a bias to be more intuitive, holistic, thinking about progression and time and anticipation and desires and emotions, or to be more linear, problem solving, and looking towards understanding patterns spatially. The real difference between men and women. Now, that doesn't mean that any of us can't do the other side. It just means it's a lot easier to do one side than the other. Now, in the talk I'll give you later that lasts about an hour, I'll describe how this came to be in the first place through evolution, why it was not only necessary, but was unavoidable that this would happen in evolution, and in fact, that the bodies that we have as males or females were actually created because of the way we thought, not the other way around. A lot of scientists will say, oh, here's some water. No, they won't say, here's some water. A lot of scientists will say that the reason that we think the way we do is because our minds adapted to the way our bodies were created, male and female. My theory is that the reason our bodies were created male and female was because two different minds were essential to the evolution of the species. I'll tell you all about that and why today, even though there was a constant number of transsexuals born in the world throughout history, today is only the time in the last couple thousand years when they actually survived long enough to be a significant part of the population. And today it's better to be actually more in the middle instead of more to one side or the other. So you'll see a lot of changes going on in society and a lot more people questioning the rigid roles of society because of the flexible nature of what's going on inside our own evolutionary process.